let's keep going. So we're on to exploring data. So let's start off with our URL again. Remember, this is a link to our Houston claims, and it's in a set of comma-separated values. So first step will be to load in our Pandas library. So to import Pandas as PD. So we'll reference the library, right, as PD. And then to read in this data, we'll do pd.read CSV, the URL, and that will create for us a data frame. Remember, we have this extra column here. So we want to say that this initial column of data, all these 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, is really our index column. So the way we'll do that is say index col equals 0. Now it's starting to look better, right? And now we'll assign this to a variable called df. And then from here, we can maybe slice the first few rows and just get a sense of the data. Now there's some columns that maybe we want to dig deeper in. Just to get a look at all the columns, remember how we do that? We can call df.columns. And now we can see these different columns. And maybe what we want to look at is the amount paid on contents claim. So the first step to exploring this, I suppose, is just to select that column. So let's do that. So do df square brackets amount paid on contents claim, and that will select this data. We see a lot of zeros there. That's okay. Let's look at the average amount. So the way we can do this is by calling .mean. And you can see this looks like about $20,000 is the average amount paid on the contents claim. And remember, this is like that insurance that's paid from flooding. Now, to get a sense of the other pieces of data, maybe the other summary statistics that we can calculate, one way to do that is you can call df amount paid on contents claim dot describe. Okay, so this will show us various summary statistics. So this is all of the values that are present across our rows. This is the average amount. This is the standard deviation. This is the minimum. That sounds about right. So you can see it's not only looking at this data is not only useful just for seeing the average, but also doing a sanity check. For example, what if we saw some negative numbers here? Then maybe those negative numbers indicate something like perhaps missing values, or they're just incorrect, in which case we would want to clean them up. Once you call this describe any one of these values, lots of times you can then specifically ask for. For example, we could do df amount paid on contents claim, and then let's see if we can do std. Can we do that? And that is the standard deviation, whatever that means. I'm not going to go into an explanation of that. It's essentially a degree of deviation from the mean. On average, how much can you expect the data to be deviating from the mean? Whatever that means. All right, so we see how we can select data and get summary statistics about a specific column. You can also do this across the entire data frame. So if you start with this data frame and then you call describe, right, we can see that it is giving me the average for the latitude, the average for the longitude. So this is perhaps a pretty good center point of where this flood data is occurring. We see this information about the lowest elevation. If you look at this, this is returning a data frame as well. And you can see that it's returning, let's take a look, for us 6 columns, okay? So we're getting summary statistics about 6 different columns. If you look at the original data set, however, df.columns, and then take a look at the length, we can see there's 12 columns. So the reason why it's not providing summary statistics about all the data is because some of the data is categorical. So it's like, what does it mean, for example, to tell you what the average amount is for, can I give you a good example? For flood zone, right? This is a bunch of letters. Like you probably don't, like the min, the max, it really only makes sense for numeric data. One thing you can do, one thing that is valuable, however, with categorical data, well, there are these different flood zones categories, and imagine that the X means perhaps it's not in a flood zone, and this is means that maybe it is in some sort of flood zone. So we can see how often each of these values occur. So let's select flood zone, if I can spell it, flood zone, and then here we'll do value counts. You see this? So this is showing me how often did each of these values occur. And what's useful about this is we can now kind of be like, all right, I should probably really figure out what these four guys mean, because they come up pretty often. The other thing you can do is you can pass through normalize equals true, and that will translate these values from a pure count to a percentage. So if we do normalize equals true, then you can see X actually occurs 50% of the time, AE occurs 43% of the time, and the next highest occurs only almost 2% of the time. So this is telling you really just have to focus essentially on these 3 or 4 values, and that's almost encapsulating the entire data set of flood values. These other values are probably too small to worry about. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, but we probably would start with just looking at these values, understanding them, seeing the significance of them. All right, so that is exploring our data. We saw that we can call the describe method on an entire data frame or on a specific column, and that this is most relevant for our numeric columns. For our categorical columns, you can select a column and then call value counts, and this tells you how often each one of the values will occur. Next up, what we'll finish up with is plotting our data. So let's do that.